Okay, New Testament class, welcome. Hope that you are doing well today. We will resume our study of the epistles of John, the Johannine epistles. Yesterday we finished up First John, and today we'll get through Second and Third John. I will try to get through this more efficiently today than I did with First John. I tried to keep this to about 35 to 40 minutes. Okay, I'll try. Um, yeah, I'm at a church here, and you'll likely in the background hear them doing the lawn. So hopefully that's not too much of a distraction for you. Okay? Well, having said all that, let's go. All right, Second John. Let's go ahead and scroll over here. Authorship. Okay, so we want to first of all deal with the writer of this gospel or this epistle. As John does in his gospel and his epistles, he does not name himself specifically. However, the language in this gospel is very similar stylistically, vocabulary to that of his gospel and First John. So that's the strongest internal evidence that we have that John wrote this epistle. External evidence, however, and if you remember, external evidence is information pertaining to authorship outside of the text itself. And usually that will come by the way of church fathers or church leaders during that time that would attest to John's authorship or maybe even archaeological evidence. But we don't have that much more evidence for first John, second John rather than first John. Wow, man, I gotta wake up this morning. Okay, but so we don't have as much evidence that John wrote Second John as opposed to First John. Okay, I'm going to get going here. However, it is a fairly brief book. You can read this epistle in short order. It won't take you very long at all to read it, and you can actually read it in one short sitting. Okay, so very short book, and it is actually believed to be or is the shortest book in the New Testament. Okay, just a brief 13 verses. So, because it was so brief, it just wasn't quoted very much among the early Christian writers. And so, therefore, um, some people would question the authorship as to whether John would have written such a piece. However, we do have one notable church father, Clement of Alexandria, and that would be around the late second century. He referred, and this would be around perhaps 90 to 100 years after John had passed on, or after he'd actually written this letter. And he referred to a second Johannine epistle in one of his writings. So that is some pretty good evidence there, some external evidence that John authored this text. All right, now, if you look at the text itself, you will notice that it begins with an address to the elder. So, who is the elder? Is the question that we want to ask. And the author in 2nd and 3rd John refers to himself as the elder. Okay. So, who is the elder? So, this would identify the author if only we knew who the elder was. So, in the Greek, okay, that is presbyteros. Okay, that's the transliteration of that word there in the Greek, from which we get the word, you guessed it, presbytery. and it's likely a reference to someone with some ecclesiastical authority. So here we see that the early church had some organization, had leadership, and as far as a function of that leadership or a title, it was likely the elder. This is someone who would have had a position within the church, uh, a pastoral, a teaching position, as well as administrative authority. So there's three views on which John authored these epistles. Let me clear these writings here so you can see the text well. Okay, three views on which John, the elder. Okay, there's the Apostle John. And this is the most likely and the one to which I hold. That would be John, the son, one of the sons of Zebedee, the one who referred to himself as the disciple whom Jesus loved. There's also another John, an elder John, some other John, um, but we don't have any proof, any evidence that some other person existed. Now, was there an elder in the church in Ephesus whose name was John? Since that was somewhat of a common name, likely, but we just don't know. We don't have any evidence that that person was any prominence. So if he wasn't any prominence, would he have written this epistle with such an authority to the church? And then thirdly, there could be an unknown elder, and then that's just a speculative theory. So those are the three views, but again, we believe this is the John here. Okay, so John the Apostle clearly had a leadership role in the church, and this would fall in the line of what this Bible calls an elder, and similar to the roles that elders play now in our church as far as a leader, a pastor, teacher, a bishop. So this was the John who was writing this letter. So it's best to accept the traditional view of John the apostle as the elder. It's not unusual for apostles to refer to themselves as elder. Peter did it in 1 Peter chapter 5 verse 1. You'll hear my pages turning in the background. The elders who are among you I exhort, I who am a fellow elder and a witness of the sufferings of Christ, and also a partaker of the glory that will be revealed. So Peter referred to himself as an elder. So therefore, it would have made sense that John also would refer to himself as an elder. All right, moving on. Date and purpose, exact dating, difficult to ascertain. Mid 1990s seems most likely. Okay, we'll go with that. And because of the brevity of this letter and it seems somewhat private in terms of the audience, it did not enjoy a wide circulation as the other letters did. There's very few quotations of Second John in the patristic writings. Wow, got to get it together here, okay? Bear with me, class. All right, it's been a long week in revival, so the voice is starting to wear down. But anyway, pray for me. So the purpose to encourage the church to continue in love. Okay, John, that was one of his favorite subjects. Uh, if John were to have a hobby horse, it would probably be love. He talked about it extensively in First John, and of course, even in the Gospel of John, right? I mean that John 3:16, for God so loved the world, right? So to encourage the church to continue in love, verse 6, this is love, that we walk according to his commandments. This is the commandment, that as you have heard from the beginning, you should walk in it. And also another purpose of this letter is to warn against hospitality to false teachers. Man, don't give these guys any place to stay. Don't be fixing meals for them, making them comfortable. Man, just don't do that. Don't be a party to them leading people to hell. Okay. And so this is the purpose. So you'll need to know this. Okay. So take some good notes on that purpose. And the good thing about watching a recording is that you can pause it and take notes as opposed to being in class and me sort of running 100 miles an hour, right? All right, here we go. You will notice in the first verse, 2 John verse 1, to the elect lady and her children, whom I love in truth, and not only I, but also those who have known the truth. So this is the person to whom the letter is addressed. Now, the question is, who's that lady? So some view this as an individual, kind of a personal friend of the apostle. Some other views out there. But verse 1 says that the person whom this is addressed to is loved by all those who have known the truth. Okay. So it's unlikely a single person or family um, that was well known. Okay, that means um, that is well known. So unlikely that we have this um, kind of person here. It most likely refers to a church, because in verse 13 it says that the children of your elect sister. So this could have been a um, kind of a way of analogy. Okay, my PowerPoint has crashed. All right, so I definitely don't want to start this recording over, so bear with me as I get back to where I was. We just love technology, don't we? Okay, okay, slideshow from current. Okay, I think we're back in business now, so let me go again. You know, technology is at its best very unstable. In a way, just words of wisdom there in using technology. We just have to be patient with it. Okay, so it most likely refers to as a church, as I mentioned, and the children of your elect sister refers to members of a sister church, right? So children of your elect sister. We refer to churches like faith or like theological conviction as sister churches. You know, like other Baptist churches would refer to each other as sister churches. Okay, sister churches, not chapters. Okay, and so that would be a way to refer to members of a church. So that's what it likely refers to. However, there's strong disagreement, even among the church fathers. Back in the second, third century, when they were closer to the time of the writing of this epistle, they did not have agreement as to who was the author of this, or to whom it was written. Did the elect lady mean a church, or was it an individual? Okay. So, so anyway, for the purpose of this class, we'll go with the church. Okay. It could, if it had been written to an individual, the truth of this does not necessarily change, but I believe the context does give it more credence that a church is what he is talking about or addressing here. All right. So we're not going to disagree either in our class. And you know, if you would take the position that it a um, is a person, then you will not fail the class. I guarantee you. Okay. So if the church fathers could disagree, likely we can disagree as well. Okay. You have some academic freedom here, but we have to believe that John wrote it and that we likely are dealing with the church here, and he did have a specific audience he wanted this letter to be read by. All right, so in verses 5 through 6, John revisits his recurring theme of the commandment of love. Again, John is quite frequent in discussing this as a topic. Okay, love for God is demonstrated through obedience. How can we love God if we don't obey Him? That's what love really is. We got some other scripture verses here that we can consider as well. Okay, from the Gospel in First John, verses 9 through 11. Let me read that. Whoever transgresses and does not abide in the doctrine of Christ does not have God. He who abides in the doctrine of Christ has both the Father and the Son. If anyone comes to you and does not bring this doctrine, does not receive him and do not receive him into your house nor greet him, for he who greets him shares in his evil deeds. Now let me back up a little bit. Verse 7. For many deceivers have gone out into the world, okay, who do not confess Jesus Christ as coming in the flesh. So John is dealing with false teachers, and again, this is a recurring theme that we see throughout the epistles in the New Testament. Man, I mean, they were dealing with false teachers, false gospels, and so John says, don't show them hospitality, don't support their efforts to undermine the gospel. Okay, and you know what? We should likewise do the same thing. Don't forward social media videos, clips from false teachers, okay, to other people. Don't like their comments. It may be a snippet of truth. Wow, we got the guy in the background here with the weed eater, so hopefully we'll be able to work through that. But uh, we have, even if there's a segment that is truth, but because a person like a Joel Osteen would teach overall a gospel that is not biblical, it was just not wise to propagate their their any of their teachings, because if you just forward some truth that they are telling, the person may take and go watch a whole sermon from them and be misled by the overall doctrinal teaching. Okay, and so this statement here again, John understands love. Love, love keeps um, us from recommending or directing people to teaching that's heresy. So if we love people, don't do that. Okay. So hospitality, being kind to people, all right, is not in order. Okay, and shouldn't be hospitable to them. Okay, that's inappropriate. If you know they're teaching the false truth or false gospel, don't don't make means for them to do this. Okay, and of course, First Timothy tells us that we should not be partakers of other men's sins. Okay? And so the early church took this seriously. We should likewise. Okay? So false teachers should have no support of any kind from the church. Okay? And of course, verse 13, John expressed hope that he would visit them soon. And really, that's how it ends, right? Okay? All right. Well, let's move on to 3rd John. Well, before we do that, let's do this. Okay. You just know that we're going to have some contributions to Canon, but I tell you what, let's get to the end of this and then we'll do the contributions. Okay. So 3rd John, let's go ahead and sweep through this as efficiently as we can. Okay. So the letter is addressed to Gaius. Okay, you would notice that the epistle starts with the elder again, and he says to the beloved Gaius. So this letter is written to an individual. His name is Gaius. He was a prominent member of the church, and he was commended for being a godly man who loved the truth of the gospel, hospitable to strangers, spiritual healthy. This is what he says, beloved, I pray that you, this is Gaius, may prosper in all things and be in health just as your soul prospers. For I rejoiced greatly when brethren came and testified of the truth that is in you, just as you walk in the truth. I have no greater joy than to hear that my children walk in truth. So here's John referring to Gaius as a good man, commending him. However, there are two other men who are mentioned. Okay, one is Diotrephes. Okay? He is criticized by trying to be preeminent. This was what we would call a church bully, right? Um, he was the leader of the pack. He was the one who kind of lorded over the people, and and he was even causing other Christians to refuse hospitality to traveling evangelists or traveling Christians. Okay, and so um, he's the one who is criticized. And of course, there's another man here mentioned. His name is Demetrius. Okay, um, and they're mentioned in verses 9 through 12. And here's what he says about Diotrephes. Verse 9, I wrote to the church, but Diotrephes, who loves to have the preeminence among them, does not receive us. Therefore, if I come, I will call to mind his deeds which he does, prating against us with malicious words, and not content with that, he himself does not receive the brethren, and forbids those who wish to, putting them out of the church. Then in verse 12, Demetrius has a good testimony from all and from the truth itself, and we also bear witness that you know that our testimony is true. So John is commending Demetrius. He is criticizing Diotrephes. And so the theme of this letter would be spiritual health, because John would have no greater joy than hearing his children walk in the truth. And here again we have John referring to the believers as his children, a term of endearment, love. Okay, and this is the way that we can take application for how we relate to the people that we serve. We love them. Okay, as children, right? We love children. We want to teach them. We want to see them grow. We have their best interest in mind. And he said, "There's no greater joy than hearing his children walk in the truth." Okay. All right. So the content of this. Okay. So trouble in the church because Diotrephes had usurped authority, speaking ill against John, refusing to receive him and his representatives. Diotrephes also mistreated those who received John and his representatives. And so this was a bad dude, Diotrephes. So John is saying, watch out for this guy. Okay, don't imitate him. He's not the kind of leader we want to be like, right? He may have been influential, may have had uh, prominence in not only in the church but in the community or village. And so, still, this guy's not to be imitated. But John says, show hospitality to the faithful who are advancing the cause of the gospel. Okay, you want to be partners with those people, right? Those who truly are genuinely trying to promote the truth of the gospel. So in Second John, the church is told not to be hospitable to heretics. In Third John, the church should show hospitality to the missionaries and become what? Fellow workers for the truth. So in other words, we play a role when we support those who are carrying on the gospel. In our day, it could be missionaries, right? As they travel to spread the gospel, make disciples, or maybe an evangelist who's really living by faith, don't have a full-time job, but they have to travel and maybe need lodging or provisions, um, or maybe some other organization that is propagating or preaching the gospel. So we want to be fellow workers. We participate in the gospel. We may not be preaching with them or like them, but by supporting them, we participate. So you see the point here, okay? If we support, we are fellow workers, we partners. But if they are not um, teaching the truth, we want to avoid them and not participate in that because we become a party to the people we support. All right, so use discernment where you use your resources. Okay, all right. So the question that you may ask if I were in class, I would bring forth the question that probably would open up a can of worms. But I just say in broader culture, right? We have organizations, say like Target, that has ungodly policies, or Home Depot, or Disney, or whatever, right? Uh, by us by us patronizing these businesses, are we participating in their promotion of um, of of ungodly um, principles? I'm pausing because I'm kind of letting you think about that and answer the question. Well, I will say this. In terms of what John is speaking here in Second and Third John, we want to keep the focus, the context on those who were the teaching the true gospel, and those who were preaching a false gospel. And so, we I don't think Home Depot or Starbucks are preachers of any kind or profess to be. And so anyway, think about that, and of course your conscience, God will give you peace about how you should do. And so anyway, um, that's uh, that's that. Okay, I won't prolong it. Won't chase that rabbit too long. All right. So the content continued in verse 9. John mentioned a letter that he had given to the church, but Diotrephes would not receive them. He intercepted that and would not let it be delivered. So he had his own purposes for the church that worked against the furtherance of the gospel, and he was one who was a bad character. Okay, all kinds of people can make their way into the church. Obviously, John exhorted Gaius to follow what is good, as exemplified by Demetrius. Okay, so you don't want to know Demetrius was a good guy. Okay, good guy. Okay, Diotrephes, bad guy. Okay, so if we were to go by Diotrephes, we would kind of draw a little, ooh, that's a frown there. Okay, if we were, this is an emoji for Diotrephes, right? Or maybe an angry emoji. But anyway, won't get into all that. But for Gaius, we'd have a good emoji, right? And a smiley face, right? He's a good guy. Of course, Demetrius also. Okay, good guy, good emoji, right? All right, enough of that. Um, so let me erase this, adding some delight to the presentation. So John even implied in verse 11b, okay, that Diotrephes was lost. Okay, he was lost. He says, "Beloved, do not imitate what is evil, but what is good. He who does good is of God, but he who does evil has not seen God." That means he has not experienced the salvation, a born again faith experience in Jesus Christ. Wow. But he was in the church and he was a leader. Wow. You mean to tell me there are unregenerate people that serve in leadership roles in the church? Wow. Yes. Okay. So his behavior is what would be the clue as to his lostness. The fruit, right? The fruit. good tree bears good fruit. Okay, a bad tree bears bad fruit. The fruit implied that he was a lost man because a godly leader, a servant leader, would not be acting in such a way. So we have to wonder sometimes, man, when we have leaders in the church and how they behave, if they are the Diotrephes kind, that perhaps you wonder, are they really saved or just carnal? All right. So John closed the epistle by stating that he had hoped to see them soon. Strong friendship. Okay. John wasn't just writing letters. He wanted to be with them. Something about the ministry of presence, right? I hope we don't miss that either. Okay. The ministry of presence. In our day of so much technology that can allow us to address people remotely through social media, emails, text, messaging, but there's nothing like wanting to see them. And if some of you, God may lead to a church, and it may be a mega church, but don't get disconnected. No matter how large your platform may be, don't get disconnected from people. Always be willing to touch people. Okay? All right. Hey, that is it. We are done with 2nd and 3rd John. Next on the list will be Jude. Of course, we'll do that in class, start next Tuesday, Lord willing. So that will conclude the presentation for 2nd and 3rd John. Again, hopefully through it being real time and having to hear all of the other sounds are not too distracting for you. Okay, so as we wrap up here, let me do this. We must do the contributions to the canon, right? I don't have it in the slide here, but we're going to write it down, and hopefully you will do the same. Okay, it's in your book, pages 924 and 925. But we only have two. Okay, we covered 1st John already. We had three, but so we have two here for 2nd and 3rd John. Okay, so for 2nd John, we have the prohibition against extending hospitality to false teachers. Okay, and that is from 2nd John. Okay, all right. My writing is, yeah, that penmanship there is atrocious. I know. All right, but so number 2 here, we have a warning against autocratic church leadership. Okay, that's from 3rd John. Takes us back to Mark 10, right? Where Jesus, uh, when the disciples were arguing about who was the greatest, right? They all were thinking they were Muhammad Ali. They were arguing who was the greatest. And Jesus says that it shouldn't be that way among you. Okay. Um, he says, whoever desires to become great among you shall be your servant, and whoever of you desires to be first of all shall be slave of all. For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life a ransom for many. So those are the two contributions to canon. You want to write those down. You'll see those again. Okay. And so again, the writing there is a bit um, hard to read, but hopefully you'll be able to make that out. Okay. Well, all right. That will conclude the presentation. And Lord willing, we'll see you next Tuesday. Okay. Have a wonderful weekend and God bless.